It seems kind of like we're leading away from that, though, doesn't it, in some regard? I don't know if it's just how high up you extrapolate. Obviously, we can't touch the president, but your local officials sometimes you feel like there's that barrier between you and them, even at a county level.
Oh, I hope that's not the case.
You're
So
like,
I
that's what I'm trying to break down.
That's basically it. Yeah, no, I think a lot of the troubles we're seeing in public service right now are due to a past of administrations wanting to be risk adverse, and you don't really want to be out there because that gives public the ability to see if you made a mistake. I think the future is the other way around, and bringing that transparency in and having that relationship with people that they don't see you as some person behind the curtain, doing nefarious things. They get to be a part of it all.
Accountability is the key.
Yeah.
And people don't really like that, especially when you get into elected officials, because when you make a mistake, the inclination is we have to kind of sweep that away. Because if you
Uh,
acknowledge it and you recognize it, then does that discredit you for future decisions that you make? Does that call into question where you stand? That seems to be the line of thinking, right?
I think you're making even like a broader philosophical argument right now in what it's like to be a person today. Like, I think you
Yeah,
absolutely
nobody likes
can.
to make mistakes.
Yeah, well, I mean, for fear of the repercussions, right? But I think we have to be willing to. That's how you grow. In this line of work, the importance is accuracy. If we can catch any mistake possible as early as possible through transparency, audits, whatnot, that's key. The reputation is gained by providing accuracy. I think it's the hiding that's the mistake.
Do you think that that hiding happens a lot?
I don't.
Or it's just the fear from the public that it's out there?
I think it's the latter. I think we're really careful about keeping processes really tight. We do a lot of auditing within the organization, in the county, in the elections office, in other elections offices. There's similar protocols, um, but I think there's always just that worry. Bringing a camera in, it makes people a little more worried. Once something's recorded, it's there forever, and so there's that concern. One of the things Humboldt County does that no other county does in elections is we have a an independent organization do a full audit of every election that we run. So they get to scan their own ballots, or they get to scan the ballots. There's a chain of custody. It's a whole process. Other counties are afraid that a mistake will be found. We're able to sleep at night once they get through their process because we know that no mistakes were made.
Why do you think we're the only county in the state that does that?
That's correct.
That seems kinda crazy.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
It's that risk
That
averse
mistake
component of it.
factor.
I think it's the risk aversion. I think once you start bringing other people in, you're worried that they might not be charitable to any process mistake, and that you enter into that adversarial relationship with checking your work rather than seeing it as a cumulative process.
It's an interesting time for elections and to be involved in that
Yeah,
because everything is called into question now. For
absolutely.
better or for worse, now everybody thinks, "Is there something nefarious going on? Should we be paying more attention to this? Can we trust the process?" Whether it's valid or not, there's that air around it now of how legit are our elections?
And that's yeah,
That's gotta
no,
be frustrating for you where you've been working in this and you've worked with elections in the past to hear that, and then you sit here and think, "Guys, we're pretty solid here."
so there's two types of that question that we get asked. There's the type where somebody wants to know the answer to it. They want to find out and know in order to either address the issue or figure out why it's not an issue. There's that like good faith question. We love that question. That question creates poll workers. We engage with them. They come in. We show them the process. Show them a tour. Tell them what we do. Ask them to be a part of that process so that they can make the sausage with us, and we get lifelong poll workers that way. The other version of that question is the one in bad faith. It's that South Park Cartman "I'm just asking questions" approach, where the question's a statement. It's not really. It's a rhetorical thing that's meant to just cast doubt, and that's the part that's tough. That's the part that disenfranchises voters by making them believe that their vote doesn't matter.
Do you think that that's where a lot of that stems from, is just trying to cause that divide and instill in people that your vote really doesn't matter?
Oh, that's a few levels higher than I think I can answer. I try not to get in people's heads that way. I know that that ends up being the result. I think one of the things that I hear constantly campaigning is that I don't vote because my vote doesn't matter, and you have a conversation a little bit about that with them, and it's a lot of that stuff they've heard.
Is that the wall that you come into most frequently? Is, "Yeah, I'm not really gonna vote. It doesn't matter. I'm not gonna take the time. What's the point?"
I don't know if it's the wall I run into most frequently. It's the one that hurts the most, though. If somebody doesn't support my campaign because they support my opponent, I'm fine with that. As long as they're voting, I'm happy. Uh, be a little happier if they were voting for me, but at least the process is working, and that's all working out. It's the I don't cares that really hurt.
How do you begin to bridge that gap? How do you reach those people that are maybe older and set in their ways of, "I'm not voting anymore because there's no point. I don't see the value in it." How do you bring those people to the table? Because it seems like the younger generation is more inclined to vote. And then is it just an age thing where you kinda time out?
Oh, the data shows the opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. The
Okay.
older after 30, once you hit your 40s, you're a voting machine. But prior to that, there's a gap between like 19 and 30 where life is hectic and you care about other things, or whatever the reason is. That's the voting gap, really. That's where you see less voter turnout. You might see more posting on Instagram about it, but if you look at the demographics, it's in the other direction.
I would not have guessed that.
Yeah.
You do see a lot of that on social media. Everybody posts their "I voted" sticker.
Yeah.
Huh. Is that
Well, not everybody.
not not
You
everybody?
just get to experience. Instagram gives you an algorithm of things that make you feel good, and so it's a disproportionate view on reality, a little, I imagine.
So do you think that you can reach that age group?
I think so. I think there's some barriers at play when it comes to life. I think some of how you address that is by making it easier to vote. Vote by mail has been an incredible thing on that front. I
That's a
know
touchy subject nowadays.
it can be. It hasn't been with a lot of the people I've talked to. Vote by mail has been around since the Civil War. It's not a new thing. It's not changed drastically in the last 5 or 6 years, 8 years, and so I think some of the touchiness comes from that Cartman style approach to questioning things.
Just the question for question's sake,
Yeah,
not to provide any value or to provide any sort of clarity to the subject.
that's it. Yeah, or to identify a weakness. I love identifying weaknesses. If there's somewhere where we can make the process stronger, I'm all about that. But you have to identify one in order to really have that conversation go in a meaningful way. If the data and history shows that there's not a problem, like reducing that for the sake of an unknown security feature, I just don't see that.
So I have to ask, why are you running? Do you feel like you can bring something to the table? I'm always interested in that when somebody decides to run. Like why? What was that switch that flipped for you?
I got asked. I said no a couple of times, but I decided to do so because I think I can do a job that's very difficult to do better than anybody else that was thinking about running. Uh, I say that I couch that because I really, for a while there, I was hoping my boss would change their mind and not retire. But elections are difficult things. They're really complicated. We get about 100 laws that get passed each year that change how elections happen. Um, and then we have all these processes in a very complex, changing ground that you really need experience in that side of things in order to do this job well.
It is interesting in the sense that you come from one side and your opponent comes from the other side,
Yeah.
and that merging of the two offices into one. Do you
There's there's a historical component to that, and it makes some sense. You want your voter rolls to be accurate, right? And who better than the person that has custody of birth certificates, death certificates, and all that jazz. And so there's that part of it. I think underlying a lot of these offices is understanding how to run like a good public administration. Um, it's it's uh it's similar to getting an MBA, running a business. whether you're producing, widgets or, you know, screws. Like there's an underlying basic skill set necessary in order to do that well. You need to understand payroll, HR, procurement issues, stuff like that. I think I have the background in order to do both. I think I can. I know how to go about addressing things like the digital divide. I know how to incorporate technology thoughtfully when it's appropriate. I understand processes and seeing public administration from the perspective of processes. And I think I could bring those to bear in a way that'll make things go smoother going forward.
I did see that your opponent had put out that newsletter, and then you had corrected some of the information that she put out. And one of the arguments that I thought was interesting that was made through that was the idea that there's a lot of focus on the registrar aspect of the position. And it didn't seem like, at least from some perspective, that there was enough focus on the recorder position and the importance of that role. Do you have a take on that?
Um, I mean,
It's hard because the two roles are merged. So you need someone that can be adept at both. You don't want someone that's just balanced on the registrar aspect or just balanced on the recorder aspect. You need someone that can branch both of those.
yeah, absolutely. Um, so I think the Registrar of Voters gets a lot of attention because you can't undo elections. Once an election happens, once results are certified, you can't take that back. And so there seems to be a lot more on the line on that front, in that we're not able to make mistakes. Um, if a document gets recorded incorrectly, there's maybe a little more leeway there than if a vote. I can't even imagine. Then if very bad things that give me anxiety nightmares happen in elections, and so I think the emphasis is there for that reason. I think it's important. I think both offices are clearly vital. They're important. I don't think either of them should go away. One of the questions that I'm often asked is if I think that the two should be separated, um, and I don't think I see it working out that way across the state. This has been done in some areas, and the experiment's not gone so well, and they're merging back together. I think there's a cost to having two elected officials in that capacity. One of the concerns I had when that question came up is the thought of the registrar of voter becoming an appointed position. And so a lot of why I responded, my campaign responded as strongly as we did, is because that's just not a viable option.
Yeah, can you explain that situation just for people that don't understand or didn't receive the newsletter? And can you just move your mic just a tad bit for it? You can pull it out so you don't have to lean over awkwardly for you.
Yeah. Um, so my opponent put out a newsletter stating that the clerk recorder was the elected position and the registrar was an appointed position. And that it just so happened that was just the way of things. That it was a tradition for the clerk recorder to function as the registrar. That's dangerous. That puts a lot of power in the board of supervisors' hands, which isn't inherently bad, but there's a conflict there, right? The board of supervisors are up for election every 4 years, and I don't know if you want the person running elections to answer to them. I think that ultimately the registrar of voters needs to answer to the voters, to the public. Um, and so any insinuation that moves it in that direction, that gives cause for that to become a reality, that's dangerous.
And her argument against that was that she was speaking in a historical context, that in some places you still have that where they can be appointed by a board of soups. Correct? Is that was my interpretation from
I mean, the statement was what it was in terms of,
what she said.
yeah, she said that this is the current situation. This is what it is. It's hard for me to see the historical angle. What's going on now is what's going on now. If there's a historical argument to be made, it seems to be an argument to change what's going on now, which is that the registrar of voters is elected.
Do you think that was purposeful or she just wasn't aware of it?
I can't.
Speculate.
Yeah.
Um, It is interesting that the 2 positions are joined. That was in '96, right, that they made that?
Yeah.
And you don't think that you think it should stay as 1 position. Is that just an ease thing where there is some overlap between the 2, or
I think that's the main thing. Financially, it makes sense too. I don't know if you really want more administrative bloat by having dual sets of administration overseeing the two offices.
but it
When
is 2 separate offices, right?
physically, yeah,
Is it 2 separate staff?
yeah, that's
Okay.
correct. Yeah, there's some overlap. Ben Hirschberger, who was the third candidate in the primary, he's the fiscal officer for both offices, and so there's some hierarchical overlap that goes there.
But not to the extent that it would make sense to hire out an additional person for each role.
Yeah, I can't see that. Yeah, it's hard for me to imagine um, having two elected officials running those operations. I don't know if yeah, it's hard for me to imagine. The manager position on that office, there's two managers. I'm the election manager. That side has a manager too, has been vacant. I think since the beginning of the year. Um,
Is that due to staffing?
they retired.
Mm.
We saw a lot of retirement. And I could be wrong in the beginning of the year, but it's been vacant for a while now, and things are moving smoothly as they go. I think I think there should be some restructuring. I think one of the things I'd like to explore is getting a deputy. Every other department head has a deputy. That'll make it easier to manage both offices and have a good vision for what's going on the ground.
Is there not currently a deputy clerk? There's not.
No. So, and that's, there's different titles are structured to how your organization's set up. So there's technically deputy clerk recorders and deputy registrars. I'm a deputy registrar in that I can perform the actions of an elections official. But in other jurisdictions, there's a title that is the deputy clerk recorder and registrar of voters that functions like a second in command.
And so it's the way it's structured here, it's more informal.
I mean, you end up with two managers, and the offices are structured in such a way that they get split up more. Whereas in other jurisdictions, that splitting isn't as set in the organization.
And so would you hire out a deputy for both sides, a deputy clerk and recorder?
No,
Just the
no,
one.
it'd be the one that oversees both. Yeah,
And that would help you with your workload,
exactly.
presumably.
Yeah. Well, with the workload and just maintaining a presence in both offices. When you have one person bouncing between offices, it's just harder to oversee operations.
Would it make sense then to merge the 2 offices? Maybe not lose the staff, but at least consolidate it to 1 building?
I mean, that'd be great. I don't know how much that would cost. That cost a pretty penny. The needs in terms of both offices are pretty unique. We need a big warehouse in elections. We need a lot of controls in terms of gates and security. It'd be a great building. Other counties have created such a space for both offices and kept them together. I think that'd be great, but
The
it's
investment into it would be
huge.
up
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Which you think that would be something they would approach where they have consolidated the 2 positions? Think that would be the next
The next
transitional
step.
step of,
Yeah,
"Okay, let's maybe put them in the same building?
yeah,
Maybe
for
different
sure.
floors?"
I mean, there's a lot of room to talk about having like a one-stop shop for county services, right? There isn't one. If you want to go to the planning department, you're going to a different place than if you're going to the elections office or DHHS. There's just we're spread out across Eureka and the county.
And so how long have you been an election manager?
So I got not a point. I got hired as the election manager. I think around April. Yeah,
April. Okay, April of this year.
yeah,
Okay.
recently.
So still fairly new in that position.
Yeah, when I ran in the primary, I was still a specialist.
And so what does that job entail?
Oh, the specialist or the
The
manager?
manager.
So the manager is just that. I oversee all of the operations that go on in elections. So everything from payroll, timekeeping, through to understanding and interpreting election code. I oversee different projects and making sure that the timelines are met. Um, It's just running the office on the day to day.
And so is there a requirement to maintain some neutrality in terms of politics with that position?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The appearance of impropriety is often worse than the impropriety itself. We mitigate that as best we can. So, for example, I'm on the ballot this time. I was on the ballot in the primary too, so that limits the amount of work that I could do on certain components of it. So I shift my time a little. At no point do I work on the ballot or with ballots. Um, that's something that I just keep my hands clean of in order to remove that appearance of impropriety.
Better safe than sorry.
That's it.
And I noticed I read an article that you registered as no political party affiliation.
I was previously registered as no political party affiliation. I'm currently a Democrat.
Okay. And what was the switch back to the Democratic Party?
There's been a lot going on in the national news that really showed me that I share a lot of the same values when it comes to how this office gets run with the Democratic Party. I think the January 6th committee has been a pretty big part of that. Um, there seems to be an attack on objectivity, like the objective nature of facts and truth, and uh, and it seems to be coming from a particular place. I don't know if that's a party distinction, but I think that there are components of it that have been woven in certain political platforms.
You could almost say that we're having an argument over what is factual.
Yeah, and that's hard.
Who
That's a
wins that discussion?
I think
That's a hard one to have.
oh no, I mean I think empirical facts win that one.
You would think,
Yeah,
but people will argue with you till they're blue in the face.
yeah, but I don't know what I don't know what that means. You can make an argument about anything. We can talk about what's better, vanilla or chocolate ice cream, and what does that amount to?
So you registered back almost as a recognition that that's just more in line with your ideals.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a crazy time to be in politics.
yeah. It's a tough time. The work that I do is such that the more you're doing it, the less you're paying attention to some of the politics that go along. I work 10, 11, 12-hour days or more, getting closer to the election. A lot of people in my staff do. By the time election day hits, we don't usually even care who's going to win. We're just wanting to make sure that the process is smooth and that it's accurate and that it's good, that it's a, a trust filled, valid process. So in a way, the position makes you nonpartisan.
You almost have to be.
Yeah, no, there's no other way to do it. Yeah.
Now, with the election fraud has been a big national story for a while now.
Yeah.
Was there any of that surrounding our local elections?
No, not really. We always get people, so we always get people calling, yelling, threatening. We get that. It's been a little more lately, but not in a concerted effort like we've seen across the state or across the country. Not in such a way that I've feared for my life, like some of my colleagues have.
And they're just calling you up threatening that if their candidate doesn't win, there's going to be an issue?
No, it's couched, so it's put into a threatening you because you did a thing. Even if that thing isn't something you do in this state, even if that's a piece of equipment that isn't used by your office, uh, they uh, they usually have strong feelings about what they feel the truth is, and and that you're complicit in the great harm that was caused to them in their version of the truth.
Does it bother you when you hear people attack the system in that way or
Uh,
attack the belief in it because you work so closely and you do have this understanding of how the process actually works? Because you're seeing the behind the scenes stuff that most people aren't seeing.
there's a sense of sorrow. So, like I said, there's two versions of that. There's the one that's in good faith and people are concerned. That doesn't bother me at all. I enjoy that. But it's the bad faith. It's the closed minded. It's the fact that this is just now how it is, regardless of what information we share, regardless of how transparent we are, um, there are people out there that have been wound up with lies, um, and they're just hurting, and they're hurting in such a way that it's causing pretty significant harm to the process. Um, in this office, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, Green Party, American Independent Party, the person you want running this office, you want them to run it without any of that in their consideration, even if that person's a part of your party. Um, and the idea behind that is that we can't afford to have anybody doubt the process. We can't afford that to be the way that this goes. The process works because the candidates feel like the results are due to the will of the people. As soon as that stops being the case, um, yeah, I can't even imagine that.
That transparency aspect seems to be a big portion of your campaign focus.
Yeah.
Is that because it was lacking in the previous
No,
position, or you just think that it could be expanded on?
I think it could be expanded on. I've been a transparency nerd since college, so so back in community college, I'm a non-traditional student. Means that I went to college when I was old, and so I worked, and I had a full-time job, and I showed up to college hungry because I hadn't had dinner yet, and this is going to be a long story, but we'll get back to it. Trust me. Um,
I'm sorry, could you just pull that? You want that, like, you can scoot it out the mic stand if you want. You just want it kind of right in front of your mouth a little
all
more.
right, is that good?
Yep.
All right, and so um, and so I was going to school. Dining services weren't provided in the evening, even though they were required in the course catalog or our contract with the university. And so I went and complained to a professor. The professor told me to do something about it. So I started showing up to school board meetings. Trustee meetings is what they're called, the board of trustees. And I complained to them about it. They didn't do it. Their meetings weren't noticed right. There were some Brown Act violations, which I didn't know what a Brown Act violation was at the time. Um, and I got involved, and the more I got involved with that public process, the more I saw the value of the mechanisms for the public to engage with its governance. Um, and I got us lunch services, pre-made sandwiches in the evenings, but it was something. And that kind of just started a path forward. In when I was at HSU, now Cal Poly Humboldt, um, me and a fellow student worked on a piece of legislation to update that transparency law and get that going because that was such a valuable tool for us to interact with government. And those values of transparency have kind of been instilled in me at this point. They're a big part of how I see the world and how I see government functioning well. Um, a lot of the harm that's been caused with misinformation has been caused because there's been a gap there. We haven't communicated as well. We haven't we haven't seen outreach as a meaningful component of the work that we do. We're worried about security. We're worried about process. We're worried about transparency in the sense that we're open to having you come, but we haven't gone to where you're at as much. We haven't met you where you're at. I think I believe in this concept of inoculating people with the truth. It's harder to believe bullshit when you know what's going on and you have a relationship with the people doing what's happening. When you yourself have done that work, you're less likely to believe things that are blatantly untrue.
And so, what does that outreach look like for your office?
I think it's across the board. It's stuff I've already engaged in since I've been with the office. Things like our equipment testing. We do a thing called a logic and accuracy test in our office. It's coming up on October 3rd for this upcoming election, where we test all of the equipment with a predetermined set of ballots to show that they're reading the ballots accurately and producing the results that are expected, so that there's nothing going on with the equipment that's nefarious, that the programming is good, that everything works well. It's a test of the system. We used to do that and maybe have a person or two show up. And one of the big things that I did was I got Access Humboldt involved and put it on public access television, so that whether you wanted to come to our office in the morning or just watch from home, you could do that. Or if you wanted to watch it later because you were working, you could see it on YouTube. it's bridging some of those divides where we look at transparency not just in having a seat at the table for you, but in how we can get you to that seat most efficiently. And I think that's a key in outreach that hasn't necessarily been met.
Well, and transparency just as a whole is always a good thing.
Yeah,
You can
absolutely.
never be too transparent, especially when it involves the government.
Oh, for sure. I
But
mean, there's some places, personnel issues. You want to be cautious of your workers' rights and making sure that that's all well. But in terms of process, no, everything should be transparent. I'm a huge advocate of that.
and with Access Humboldt, that's perfect. You're on the board there as
Yeah,
well, right? Yeah.
you did your homework.
Yeah, I had Matt Knight on,
Oh,
Eric Kirk. Those guys are great.
yeah, they are.
I think that whole program they're doing over there is fantastic.
Absolutely.
That's a
Yeah.
that's a great community resource that I don't think enough people know about or take advantage of.
One of the things I talk about as an Access Humboldt board member when I talk to the public who rarely knows what Access Humboldt is unless they're already connected, but I talk about the podcast kit we have at Access Humboldt. We have a little kit that you could check out that'll let you get started with a podcast. It's got a mic, it's got a little iPad, it's got everything you kind of need in order to start a fledgling podcast. And so a lot of the work that it does is in bridging those gaps and getting people to the table. The internet and podcasting and YouTube have had a lot of seats at the table, but there's still that barrier sometimes with equipment or knowing how to. Matt runs some amazing classes over there in production. So yeah, it's cool work.
Yeah, I would have taken advantage of that had I known about you guys,
Mhm.
when I started this podcast. The resources are there. It's just almost like we were talking about with your campaign, just getting the information out to the people, saying, "Hey, this is here. We're branding this. This is what you have access to. Here it is. You just have to shine the light on it."
Oh, for sure. And it's resource intensive. Doing outreach takes time. I mean, I'm seeing that with this campaign. Being out at Friday Night Market every Friday, it's just time consuming. When you're running an organization, that's staff time and there's a cost to it. But it's about factoring that into the way that you do business so that you can hit that mission statement and get to where you're going.
That one-on-one connection when you are at those Friday night markets, has that proven to be pretty useful for you in running the campaign?
If anything, it's vitalizing. I walk away from those feeling confident in what I'm doing, and not just because I get praise. I get both sides of it. I get people coming in there and hammering me with questions about what they heard and what they expect, and they think this about me or that about me. But it's just the engagement. It's nice to go somewhere and talk to people that care about this thing that I'm super nerdy about. This whole election campaign thing, public administration. That engagement's it's huge.
And so, when did the focus on elections start to rise? Was that your first introduction to politics, getting those sandwiches for the students?
Uh, well, so I've been a poll worker since I was 17.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you started out young.
Yeah. No, I'm the child of immigrant parents who gained their citizenship, and that was like just monumental in the quality of our lives. Neither of them missed an election after their citizenship. They were both also union members, and uh,
And
and
you were a union rep at one point.
that's correct. Yeah, I was a steward. Um, but part of being in a union, one of the strongest tools you have as a union is the collective, and what stronger form of that than voting?
Now, as a union steward, that's kind of a double-edged sword nowadays in some regard, isn't it? Or at least from an outside perspective, you always hear people are either really supportive of a union or they think they're the worst thing on earth.
So I've worked in several jobs. Some of them have had good unions. Some of them have had amazing unions. AFSCME, the union that represents Humboldt County employees, is an incredible union. It's great. My work as a steward was essentially that as a go-between between the people on our job site and the union's practices. In addition to that, I was also their advocate. So when you get called into the boss's office and you see an HR rep there, there's a power dynamic there. Having a union steward there offsets that power dynamic. It's somebody there that knows the rules and makes sure that your rights are being upheld and that you're getting the right kind of process going forward.
Do you think that unions are misunderstood or underutilized in some way? Because that's been a fairly big topic recently. I think Amazon had a couple stores unionize, Starbucks as well, and there was another one. I can't think of the other big one. Maybe an Apple store tried.
There's been a few. I feel like every week there's a new.
They've been popping up.
Yeah, I
I don't
think
know if
Home
it's.
Depot. I saw Home Depot somewhere
Oh,
like
I hadn't
looking to
heard
get
that.
unionized. Yeah, no. I'm a union guy. Like I said, I grew up with union parents. I've been in unions. I'm pretty pro union. I think I'm on the management side now, and I'm still pro unions. I think having a really good relationship with a union and with that collective bargaining process makes it so that you have employees that feel valued, that that have um, that don't have that power disparity at the bargaining table, and are therefore able to advocate for their worth in such a way that that they feel good about coming into their work, that they're not being taken advantage of. One of the biggest problems we have in the county is recruitment. It's a huge problem. Our office uh, has just barely reached full staffing. We went into the previous two elections with partial staffing, which is devastating. I'm in an office of 8 people, and so that's just maddening hours of working in order to make up for that work. You look at DHHS; they're facing similar issues. The sheriff's deputies, they're also
Yeah, it seems
ridiculously
to be a problem
understaffed.
across the county.
Absolutely, and compensation's a big part of that. Having unions be a part of that conversation and making sure that they're entering into that with um, with an organized and um, good faith effort from management. I think that's key in order for the work to be done and to be done at a very high professional caliber. I think everything I hear about unionizing, you're going to have your bad apples, but that could very easily be said about the private sector without unions.
And so, as a union guy, in your perspective, where does the pushback stem from? Is it just a business perspective of we don't want to fork out any more money?
I mean, I think that's it, right? Corporate profits are at a record high in a recession. That's a weird economical place to be. Um, And I could see how unions might make those corporations uneasy about maintaining that trajectory of record high profits.
And so, where does the public play into that? Because some people aren't fans of unions, even if they're not in that sector, right? They have their own opinions on unions.
I
Is
think,
that just the misinformation, or does that come from just those companies buying ad space saying, "Hey, this is what a union's going to do," and if you let them come in, you might lose your job, and nobody wants that.
well, I know one group that doesn't want that, right? um, yeah, no, I think we got a pie, right? And where we're at right now is that there's such a tiny portion of that pie that's being given to workers, and that's giving to the working class people. And when I say that corporations have record high profits, that means they have a record bigger portion of that pie. I think it's easy for those with that giant slice to say, unions are bad. They're going to cut into your already sliver of the pie. When I think historically it's pretty obvious that it goes the other way. That unions are what negotiate in order to give working class people a bigger slice of that pie. I think a lot of the media, a lot of the pushback that goes against unions is those preserving that giant record big slice of pie.
Yeah, especially when that pie, like you said, is growing and they're cutting workers
That's it. Yeah,
and profits are just through the roof.
absolutely.
Like that, we can't get a little bigger slice of that.
Yeah,
Where's all that going? To the
mega
top.
mega yachts.
Yeah, right, Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, going to the moon. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. From somebody I've never been in a union, I don't really know. I'm not that educated on unions, but I have heard differing opinions of, oh, unions are great. More companies should have them. It's for the workers. It's to support them. It's this voice that gets bigger the more people join. And then you have that alternate perspective of no, unions cripple business, they cripple growth. they're not effective. It's just a way to get a little extra money from the workers.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
I think definitely a part of that stems from the information that people get and where that's coming from.
and again, you're gonna have some bad actors out there. I don't
Understandably, we're talking about a lot of money in some cases with these businesses.
absolutely, yeah,
If you're, billion-dollar company, you don't want that etched away so you can pay your workers a livable wage.
that's it, right?
I think Andy, see if you could pull this up there. The train workers, have you heard anything about
Yeah,
that?
they just had a big victory.
Yeah. Did
Yeah.
they sign? Did they come to
Last I heard they did. Don't hold me to that. I've been kind of busy with the election, but last I heard, last I saw on my phone as I scrolled by, it looked like they got the win.
and it what's crazy with them is they weren't even asking for a lot. I believe time to go to the doctor. Like,
That's
these
it,
guys are
right?
working 7 days a week was my
Yeah. They
understanding.
had like a point system where you can get fired eventually if you went to the doctor more
You
than
had
a
to
couple
work
of
through
times.
COVID even if you were sick.
That's it.
I mean, those are the situations that you look at and think, "Yeah, maybe somebody speaking up for the workers probably isn't that bad of a thing."
Oh, for sure. Good fences make good neighbors, you know? A union is that good fence. It's you want to enter into that relationship with your employer where you're both entering it into it in good faith. With the railroad, it seems like one entity in all of that wasn't acting in great faith.
So I'm getting the impression that you've always been, I don't want to say an activist, but active in politics, active in representation. Was this just kind of the next natural step? I know you said you kind of wanted your boss to run again.
Yeah.
Are you just running out of a necessity, believing that I'm the next fit for that? Nobody can do this better than I can. So if he's not gonna run, I'm gonna bite the bullet and step in there.
She.
If
So
she,
if,
oh,
if she's not
my
going to run,
apologies.
yeah, no, you're good. Um, yeah, if she's not going to run, yeah, I think, like I said, I was asked to do it. I I'm an introverted person, At
I
my
wouldn't have
core,
guessed. Yeah, we've been talking.
at my
Fine.
core, I'm an introverted person, a bit of a couch potato. Um, in terms of how I like to spend my free time. This whole campaign thing, this whole being a public servant thing, because I prefer that term over politician. Um, it's a whole thing. Like it's not something I expected to have to do. I I'm an election nerd. I'm a policy wonk. I like I like figuring out organizations, solving problems, new problems, creative problems, and I like taking a project and moving it along and making it better. Um, I never expected to have to run for office. I enjoy being informed. I definitely have pretty strong values that I recognize and have spent time cultivating it. But yeah, I don't know if I would have seen myself running for office prior to when I announced for this one.
Is this a pretty public facing office? Or you, because obviously the Board of Soups, they get a lot of attention. The Eureka City Council gets a lot of attention. Is your position a little more under wraps?
Usually, previously, not anymore. Elections are being seen in a new light. I think that there are bad actors out there that have seen an opportunity when it comes to this position. You're seeing that across the state. Shasta just had an attempted recall over their clerk recorder, a Republican, great person. I've had the privilege of meeting them. Trust them fully. They are great at their job. But there's a nefarious take on it. There's a lot of power in this position. Um, the complexity, the difficulty, the impact, and the fact that you can't take back elections means that putting a bad actor into this seat can have just devastating consequences. And you're seeing it across the country. I thought you had that the clerk recorder from Colorado that let people in and tampered with equipment and all that resulted from that.
I had not heard about that.
Yeah. That's about as much as I know off the cuff, but yeah.
And let people in and intentionally tampered with equipment, or
I don't know if they'd call it tampering. I think
Andy, see if you can find that one.
yeah, they they let non-elections officials, non-authorized staff have access to equipment. That county had to replace all that equipment because it was no longer certified. It was no longer pure.
Was this during an election?
It was shortly after, I believe.
So it didn't call into question the results because it happened after the fact.
Well, I think that was the attempt, was to call into question the results to find the issue with it. But yeah,
This idea of bad actors, they're in everything. How do you escape that?
um, I mean they're not though, right? You know,
Well,
there's a
some
good
people,
public
that's
process.
true. It's some people that are just bad actors that will take advantage of any opportunity that they have.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's just that having good relationships, that there's no, your reputation matters. How you conduct yourself, how you engage in this work, it's key. And I think it speaks for itself. That recall failed.
The Colorado one?
The Shasta
The
one.
Shasta one.
Yeah.
What was the deal with the Shasta one? Why were they?
It was election deniers looking to get rid of them.
It is such a crazy time. Have
Yeah.
you ever noticed where you have been tied to elections in this way? Has it ever been this called into question? I know there was the hanging chads thing. The Bush and Kerry was also called into question.
It's not been, I mean, this is unique in that it's coming not just from, it's a broader issue. So it's not just coming in from a political party or two. It's not coming from these radical organizations. Like it's permeating. You have your everyday person coming in with these strong beliefs that I use Dominion software that My Pillow guy was talking about, and they know for a fact that you did it, even though Humboldt County uses Hart equipment and not Dominion equipment, and you can't engage with them because they think you're lying to them. It's that, I think it's that. It's how it's permeated, how it presents itself. It's just entirely different.
Yeah, I was too young for the hanging chads debacle, but that seemed like it was a bigger one, and obviously for the presidential run, but that didn't permeate down amongst the public in the same way as this.
Well, I mean, I think part of it is that you end up having, so the hanging Chad thing was based on a fact. Right now, you end up with claims that are baseless.
So it was
It's
that validity aspect. At least that one
exactly.
you did have hanging chads, so you could say, where does that lead?
Exactly. And it's something to be explored, right? If there are hanging chads, let's
As a
do something
problem.
about it. Let's solve the problem. When you cause panic, when you seek out that misinformation, or when you produce that misinformation that calls into question that which doesn't exist, you can't solve that, right? You can't disprove negative. You can't address it really without having that conversation about what's true and what's not true.
Do you anticipate us moving toward a time where voting access is so wide that you could just vote from your phone or vote through a medium like the internet?
That came up at our professional conference here a few months ago. Um, we don't like it. I don't like it. I think
From a security standpoint, you don't like it?
from a couple of places. So I understand blockchain can do some interesting things in addressing some of those securities, but I think there's the security, and then there's how easy it is for the general public to understand that security without investing much time. And I think a paper ballot is something that's absolutely essential to the process. I think security and access are kind of a balancing act, right? You can't have too much of one thing without making the other thing pointless. If we make something so secure that nobody can access it, well, that's not really democracy. The alternative is true too. If we make something so accessible that it has no security associated with it, then there's no validity to the process. I think paper ballots are one of those deal breakers. I think that having something hard, concrete, that you can audit, that you can go back and rescan, that you can make sure was processed in the way that you intended to process, that you see before placing it in the ballot box, that there's a chain of custody for. I think that's something that's easy to see and understand for anybody.
And you don't see that or think that you would almost strike a better medium through the internet because you do have that security aspect, but you also have the ease of access and that everybody's got a phone nowadays.
Well, not everybody has a phone nowadays.
Most people.
There's still the digital divide,
But
and
that would alleviate, you hear all the strife around poll taxes and polling stations being so far away or voting stations where it's hard and then you'd have to go wait in line for 3, 4, 5 hours. Seems like that would be a great way to alleviate some of that.
it could be. I mean, I don't know about your parents, but my mom struggles a little with their phone sometimes, and so I think there's other barriers there that you're going to end up facing. Another solution to that same problem that everybody also has access to is the post office, the mail. USPS delivers to every household in the country, and they'll pick up your mail too. Having vote by mail function in that way solves that same issue.
Yeah, I'm a big vote by mail advocate. That's what I do because it
Yeah,
beats going and waiting in line.
who has time?
Yeah. Who
Yeah,
wants to just go wait in line for fun when you can do it at your
absolutely.
house?
And I get some people see that as like an integral part of the experience. There's a tradition there.
You're going to a spot
Yeah,
with the intention of voting.
and then maybe you need help. Maybe there's accessibility issues with the vote by mail ballot. That you can't address internally or at home. I'm an advocate of both. I like the hybrid approach. I like giving people the option.
It's just interesting in that we are so technologically advanced and yet we're still doing elections by hand. We're still counting ballots. We're still keeping the paper. It just seems it's interesting that that's one of the few things we haven't really modernized quite
Well,
as much as we could, to the
we've
extent that we could.
we've modernized it a bunch. If you ever have time, I'd love to give you a tour of our facilities.
Yeah, I would love that.
But we have some pretty cool technology that helps us in the processes that aren't sensitive in terms of auditing. So we have a ballot scanner. So you don't necessarily have a person checking each box and tallying it in order to count it. That would take months to do if we had to do it that way, or a big warehouse of people doing it. And so we have ballot scanners that are calibrated, and we test them as a part of that logic and accuracy test. So we're able to process a lot of ballots at a time. Pretty neat. It gets adjudicated too through that system. The other thing we have is a pretty cool sorting machine for envelopes that sorts them and opens them. So it'll sort them, check the signature on each envelope at a cursory level with really tight thresholds. If it doesn't meet that, then a person will see it. There's a bunch of ways in which technology has been brought to bear in a thoughtful manner that doesn't move the pendulum too far in one direction or the other.
And yet we bank online. That's what I always fall back on because there is that security aspect of do we want to vote online? Would it be easier to manipulate? Would it be easier to do something nefarious if all of the information is passed through the internet?
You could undo a bank transaction, right? Like if the bank makes a mistake and gives you an extra 10 grand or 3 grand or whatnot, or if there's any issues with that, you're talking about a ledger that could get adjusted. After an election certified, it's a very difficult thing to take that back.
And the
There's
consequences of taking that back.
absolutely,
You
yeah,
are right in the sense that you've got one shot. It's a one and done
that's it,
situation.
yeah, and there's a lot riding on it, right? I mean,
Understandably,
yeah,
especially if you're talking about a major election like the presidency, to get that wrong would be I mean, the backlash to that would be insane.
catastrophic, absolutely, yeah, and so yeah, I see the value in bringing technology to bear.
But there's a limit.
Well, you just have to look at it in terms of what the cost is, right? You have to see the bigger picture and make sure that technology is deployed intentionally, you know, and that you're taking in all the considerations. There's definitely best practices out there, and it's always great to see what the rest of the country is doing, but to always come back and seeing what's important to us and how are we losing anything out security wise? Are we losing anything out in terms of access? And there's that transparency component of it. Um, I don't know about you, but most of the people I talk to about blockchain don't know what blockchain is.
I don't even know. I
Not
don't really
truly,
understand it. I've come
right?
across it a lot in my conversations on here, but my understanding, if you asked me to explain blockchain, I would struggle.
Right? And so, but paper ballots, right? You don't need to do any research on that. generally speaking. And if you know,
It'd be a little awkward if you needed to.
right? But I guess that's my point, though. It's that
It's
you don't have to,
simplistic.
and you don't have to. And I'm not saying this as a capacity thing. Like, I'm not saying you're not able to understand blockchain. It's the idea that you don't have to expend effort in a life that's already full of, a 40, 50-hour workday with kids and all that to understand that your ballot's secure. You know it, you see it, you're familiar with it. There's that faith in the process with that paper ballot. That's a lot to trade for a level of access that I don't know quite well if it would really mean more access.
Yeah, if it would mean more access. The access thing is that's just the issue that I'm still working through in some ways because we have come back to the idea that you have those vote by mail ballots, and those, for whatever reason, have been called into question to the point where it seems like some people don't want to utilize that.
So there's that hybrid approach, right? And
Yeah, you can go in person.
you can just bring it by in person, yeah. And
Yeah,
so that I feel like that addresses it to a point,
because
right?
you have the balance. You can go in person.
Yeah,
You are going to wait in line if there is a long line,
yeah,
or do it by mail.
yeah. Or you could bring it with you.
Do you think that the laws around the vote by mail aspect should be expanded on?
What do you mean?
Well, in some states, aren't there limitations? Well, hasn't that been a big thing, predominantly, I guess, in the red states, where there are more stringent limitations on who can vote by mail and the time frame surrounding that?
I mean, if
Or
it's
am
a
I reaching
secure
there?
process, it should be a secure process for everybody, right? If you can guarantee that a vote by mail ballot is the person's, and you have a solid process for somebody that's sick, I don't see why you would limit that uh, away from somebody that can't get off work, or that has a loved one that's sick and they can't get away from. I don't. It's hard for me to imagine a situation in which you have vote by mail for some but not for all.
Yeah, how would you define that limitation?
Yeah,
Where would you draw the line and for what purpose?
exactly. And I've heard the argument that, well, more is harder. Yeah, but it's just that's a scale issue. It's not a security issue. You just need to make sure that your processes can scale.
Did you find that Colorado information there, Andy? Do you want to pull that up on the screen? I was interested in that because I had not heard about that situation. And it is you are unique in the sense that this position seems like it's hit the spotlight because of all the election stuff, whereas before you probably could have just fit into it and maintained whatever level of introversion you wanted. Still public facing, but not you're not in the spotlight in the same way as you might be now. Yeah, that kind of sucks. As if politics and running a campaign wasn't already public
You
facing
know,
enough.
and I'm in favor of the. I don't like the reason for the spotlight, but I
But you're
think
okay with the spotlight.
I think it's so appropriate. I think this is such a critical part of what it means to be an American, the democratic process, and this is where it happens. That having people be aware of what's going on and holding those accountable that are in these positions, I think that's something that should have always been done. Having that relationship is key to having faith in the process, to believing in it, to participating in it. It's how we take ownership.
Accountability. I mean, you're preaching to the choir with that. I'm a
Yeah,
huge accountability guy.
for
I
sure.
think the more we have of that, especially with our politicians, is it benefits all of us.
Absolutely
When
benefits them.
you if you don't hold people to the standard of their office, the office diminishes, and then we just run into a shit show.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more.
What do you have highlighted here,
Oh, there
Andy?
she is.
Peters, who's the county clerk and recorder in Mesa County in western Colorado, faces 10 counts, including 7 felony charges and 3 misdemeanors. The felony charges include attempting to influence a public servant, identity theft, criminal impersonation, and conspiracy to commit criminal impersonation. Wow. The misdemeanors include first degree official misconduct, violation of duty, and failure to comply with the requirements of the Secretary of State. Can you find what she did?
It's in that, not that paragraph, but the one right below that. The pairs. There you
The
go.
pair is accused of helping an unauthorized person make copies of sensitive voting machine hard drives and attend an annual software update. Information from the machines and secure passwords were later shared with election conspiracy theorists online. Shortly after the data was leaked, Peters appeared at an event put on by MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell. We're tying back to Mike.
Yeah.
one of the leading promoters of the conspiracy theory that the 2020 election was rigged. Wow, so she definitely crossed crossed some lines there.
Oh, for sure.
And see, that is unfortunate because that provides legitimacy now to fears because people can point to that and say, well, look, this person did that. So now I'm going to use this to justify my skepticism of everybody in that position.
Yeah. No, the office has legitimacy, and that's why it's so critical to have somebody that's accountable, that's got integrity and the right values in the position, because yeah, that legitimacy can be lended, can be
Can be
given out.
abused.
Yeah.
As case in point, right here. What do you have here, Andy? The maker of the equipment, Dominion Voting Systems, has been the focus of false conspiracy theories claiming to help steal. Yeah, the Dominion voting machines. Well, it's a hard process because first off, how many people actually take the time to read about the candidates, let alone understand how the process functions from the point where you do cast your vote?
Yeah. No, I don't know, but
I can't
that, that's
imagine it's a
that's a
big portion of the public.
that's a League of Women Voters question, absolutely. But I mean, it's interesting in that we had kind of two options to go about it. We went the government is in charge of that part of it, right? In some countries in Europe, there's no campaign finance involved in elections. The government, gives each candidate so much money in order to get the word out onto them. And then here, through Citizens United, we made how aware people are of their candidates be who can raise the most funds question.
Has that been enlightening now that you're running your own campaign?
Oh,
Seeing that
absolutely. We're definitely like my campaign managers, my fiance, my website person's my best friend, my treasurer is a dear friend from college. Like we're a scrappy little campaign, and it's amazing how much money can buy you when you don't have it. And so running into that has been just eye opening in terms of how difficult it is to raise funds, and how how it's not about money. Like, because when you say funds, when I say I'm raising funds, in my mind, I'm raising the ability to make people aware. Every dollar is a voter reached, and so campaign finance has kind of made it a really interesting change where money means information.
do you think nowadays that money is definitive of whether or not your campaign succeeds?
Not at all.
Do you
Yeah.
think you could still get by as the underdog if you don't have all of the funds there?
Oh, absolutely. I think you saw that in the primary. Um, yeah, my opponent definitely outspent me. They got a couple more votes than I did, but it was a three-way race, so that wasn't enough. Neither of us won. And I think you saw it in other races. I saw that you had Natalie Arroyo on your show. She did pretty good with a pretty big campaign finance disparity. Same thing with Steve Madrone and Larry Doss. You saw big campaign finance distinctions and lopsided vote.
Yeah, it the money helps in that you can draw eyes, which is it's definitely a factor, but you have to have the substance, I
That's
think,
it.
to drive it home in the end.
Yeah.
Unless you're just running against somebody who's incompetent or doesn't have their campaign structured in a very well organized manner, then money just you can blow them out of the water. But if you have a character who who is running on something of value, I think you can buck the system a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's at the core of it. I
Which
think it.
is it's a positive aspect. That instills a little more faith in the system that the little guy can make it. If you have you know, someone with heavy pockets running and someone who really cares and wants to make an impact, that person can still do it. The system's not bought and paid for when it starts.
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, that's an uphill battle you're facing though as the little guy. Um,
Yeah, it's not great.
yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, I don't know if that gives me more faith in the system. I mean, I have faith in the system, obviously, but in terms of campaign finance, I think that yeah, that seems like the good thing happens despite it. You know,
Do you think we should limit campaign finances in some way?
I mean, we do. I think we could do a better job of it. I think we could do a better job of reporting on it. I think so. We have really good campaign finance laws in California in terms of how you need to be transparent. I don't know if they have big enough teeth in terms of holding campaigns and donors accountable. I think your podcast and the news and these mediums that people have of getting information. I think that's the key piece in all of that. I think the money can be tamed with really good reporting on where the money's coming from. You know.
Yeah. I mean, my biggest gripe with elections in general is just the format. Even taking away the money. The money's a big aspect,
All
and
right.
I think that should be addressed. But the format, when you have these debates and you get a minute to hear your question and formulate an answer, that just seems ridiculous to me. With the technology that we have nowadays, where you could have a candidate in some long format where they are answering questions and taking in questions and given reasonable enough time to actually formulate a well thought out opinion on a subject. But it's just, oh, here's your question. We're moving to the next candidate. Here's your question. Maybe you get a chance to rebut what the other person said, but we're moving on.
So yeah, I agree 100%. The questions is another part of it. You don't get really hard questions. I found I was really surprised when I was doing these forums at the kinds of questions we'd get. Um, they didn't no follow up questions usually. You kind of it's almost an opportunity to give your bylines. Your little nuggets
Hit your
of
campaign points.
yeah,
This is what I'm here
exactly.
for.
Yeah, I was expecting a debate. Back and forth. Let's get into the meat of what makes us different. I did a hot air interview that let us go back and forth a bit, and that was probably my favorite of the interviews that I did. Was having both candidates there, having a moderator ask questions and have follow up questions, and then bounce things back and forth. I think that's where you really get to know the two candidates is when you have that format, and a longer format is great for that.
The longer format, I believe, is key.
Yeah.
It's just too short. And for what purpose? Other
Sometimes it's way too short too. Like you're given this question that has like really four questions as a part of it, and then you're given just enough time to maybe introduce the basic foundation of what you'd build a question on top of. It's so difficult to do with some of these questions where you almost have to keep it at a superficial level, otherwise you're just going to lose everybody.
Yeah. It's just a downside that it doesn't need to be there anymore. People have the attention span, and especially for a position where it's an elected position, you would think that people would want to get as much information from their candidate as they could.
I've noticed that you tend to do like one person at a time. Have you thought about having multiple candidates?
I have thought about it. I have thought about it. I don't know if I would be the person for that. I would do it if two candidates wanted to come on.
Nice.
The problem is if there's more than two, then when you get into 3 and 4 in a studio like this,
Oh, that's something
yeah,
else.
you'd really have to maintain some stability because people want to talk over each other. People want to try to get their word in first or their idea out first.
You got to have a mute button.
I know we're gonna have to work on that, Andy. I would do that. I think that would be, or somebody should at least do that. I think that would be beneficial. Just to, like you said, like that Humboldt Hot Air show, to provide that ability for a long format, real debate where people are fielding questions and have the time to come to whatever conclusion they draw.
Oh, and you need a moderator that did their homework.
And that isn't afraid to push when it's
Yeah,
necessary.
yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want, like at the national level. That was yeah. I watched most of the debates. I think I was disappointed with all of them because I wasn't getting that. I was getting very very small versions of the commercials I'd already been fed, and so having something like you described would be incredible. If it's a matter of space, Access Humboldt has great facilities. I'm sure we can work something out, and getting you paired up with Matt to make something like that happen would be incredible. One of the things that I love the most about interacting with the media, with podcasts like yourself, is that the thing that gets people to vote the most is getting them informed. It's hard to want to vote when it feels like it's an arbitrary thing you're doing, when you're just ticking off boxes without really knowing who you're voting for, just a name and a title underneath their name, and most of them are ranchers for some reason. ranchers and lawyers. It's always like rancher slash lawyer. But things like this, I'll always say yes to an interview. I'll always say yes to coming on a show because it's what gets people engaged. It gives people the ability to feel like they're making an informed decision. And I think that's huge. Any amount of attention we could bring to that is what's going to get people to vote more often.
And with misinformation, I'm a big proponent that the best way, and really the only way to effectively combat that, is to provide better information.
You
When you start silencing people and criticizing them and trying to shame them into some other form of belief, you just reinforce their ideas. And I don't know if we've just lost that concept as a country, but nobody wants to have a real debate anymore. They have what they believe to be the truth, one side or the other, and your approach to the person coming from the other side is to just diminish that and say, "No, but you're wrong. So here's what's true. This is it. You're wrong." And then that person runs off and now they're reinforced in their belief, thinking that person was an asshole. They don't know what they're talking about. I'm right. This is what I believe.
So, why do you think that is?
I think social media is is a big is a big factor in that. I don't know if I'm just jaded towards social media in general, so I instantly come to that conclusion. But I think in in today's time, you have people who come to the table with their mind already made up. We're not having discussions as a means of challenging ideas or testing your preconceptions. It's reinforcement. I'm going to come to this conversation, and you if you prove that I'm wrong, you didn't. You just made me think, well, I'm over this conversation and now I'm going to move on to the next one. There's no accumulation of ideas, of hearing your points and thinking, "Oh, okay, well, that disproves what I was thinking, so now I'm gonna take this one in because that was a better idea." And then you come to the next one and it's challenged and you're either reinforced because the person came to the table with a bad idea, or you adopt that one because it's a better idea. People don't do that. And I think when you're on social media, it's just outrage. And so that's what's perpetrated throughout the ecosystem, and that reinforces people in whatever belief they're backing against it.
It's it's winning and losing, right? When people think of debates, they want to know who won, and they want to know if they were slaughtered, or if they were smashed, if they were just
If they got owned.
yeah. It's a video game approach to debating, and that's it, right? You either get better at winning, but it's not about learning.
It's not about the substance.
Yeah. So I studied philosophy in college. I have a bachelor's degree in philosophy. What that means is that I'm often really good at arguing. Um, Not because of anything inherent to me. It's just what we do a lot in philosophy is we take an idea, figure out how it works, and then fight it with some other idea. And you do that a bunch, you get some techniques and whatnot. With a lot of my friends, I refuse to have any kind of like meaningful debate because it get mean because they have that idea of winning and losing. When I go into a debate, I'm hoping I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I get something out of it. If you're right, you don't walk away any smarter. You walk away with the same amount of information as you came in with. But if you're wrong, you get to learn something.
That's the approach you would hope most people have, right? But
Yeah,
and I don't know if it's always been this way. I don't know if it's human nature, but people get tied to their ideas. And
identity. It's
it's who I
identity.
am. And so
Yeah,
if my idea is wrong, if you prove that idea to be faulty, you're pointing out some character flaw in myself, and I can't have that. And that's that tend towards aggression or, becoming resolute in your stance because you feel like your character is being attacked.
it's not your idea versus my idea. It's you versus me.
Do you think that that is a more recent evolution of debate? Is that it's that character attach, or not character attachment, but you're attacking the character of the person?
I think that's more entertaining. I mean, I think that's more likely to get the clicks. Like I think,
That's a big factor. That clickbait of if I can get you riled up, if I can
yeah,
attack you and get you really going, we're gonna get some clicks.
Yeah, absolutely. And who wants to watch the video of Nick and Juan had a moderate debate about blah blah blah. They wanna know that, Nick owned Juan, or Nick debunked Juan, or they want that, like, they want professional wrestling like approach to debate, where there's these really big highs and really low lows, and it's a very different thing than real wrestling, which can be slower. It could be, more, complicated.
Do you think you have that perspective of going into it in that way because you come from that philosophy background?
I think so. Yeah, definitely. Philosophy is one of those things that I get grief about. I just study philosophy. Good luck getting a job. Philosophy gives you a couple of really, really core skills. It lets you take a really complicated thing and understand it. Because you do that, when you're reading some German philosopher from the 1700s, and you have to write about them in an essay. You develop that ability to figure out ideas and understand how they tick, and then you end up learning how to convey that in a way that's understandable and critical.
I wonder if we can ever move the needle more towards that,
We
more in
just
that direction.
we just need more philosophy. I've always been a big advocate for having that be included in a K-12 education. I think I would have benefited from it, to have some courses like that, and I don't necessarily even want them to be called critical thinking. That's inherent to any kind of learning that you ought to be doing. But some of those skill sets, like seeing arguments, that whole framework of seeing arguments not as competitions, but as sussing out ideas to figure out, what needs to change, um, and the lack of ego that needs to be involved in order to do it. There's almost like a martial arts take on it, right? You know, um, yeah, you have to go in there and realize that it's not you. It's all about the technique. It's about creating something broader, and winning that one instance doesn't make you better.
Even sitting here and us saying that, it's hard to practice that. I get caught up in that. Even recognizing what you're saying and trying to implement that in my own life, I still get tripped up where I'll have a conversation and somebody will say something or you'll interpret it in some way and then it becomes personal and then the ego gets involved and then it's no longer a debate of ideas, it's a debate of character. It's a debate of who's the better person, who has morality more on their side.
Oh, that's
And
tough.
you just lose all productivity in that conversation. It goes from us trying to better each other or trying to learn something from each other to now I'm just gonna shit on you just because I can.
There's a guy named Epictetus, old Greek person. He's one of the original Stoic philosophers. He's my go-to person when it comes to figuring out how to do the thinking better in terms of perspective, in terms of, oh, this person's really getting to me, or, I had this interaction, and I walked away feeling less because of it, um, because of how I reacted. So much of it's a matter of, like, realizing what's in our control and what's out of our control. So much of it is seeing what's out there and what's inside. Um, like in those situations where you get questioned, where you get poked in such a way that you got to be defensive. Like, what's going on there? Who are you defending, really?
Yeah, and like you said, if your idea is wrong, it's a moment to now adopt a new idea. Would you rather stick with the wrong one and carry that through life, through all these encounters where you're going to be proven to be wrong, or be able to adapt and implement a new idea?
And you're already there. Like, everything that you are right now are new ideas that replaced old bad ideas, right? As kids, we're not born knowing everything. We're born being wrong a lot. And so you're already inhabiting this identity that was built on being okay with being wrong.
I'm reading, and I cannot remember the author, Andy. I'm going to need you to pull this up. It's called Meditations.
Oh, Marcus Aurelius.
Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I could not think of his name. I was
Yeah.
sitting over here struggling for a moment. And I have found I'm only maybe halfway through it right now, but that is an incredible book. And the perspective of reading something from so long ago and it still resonate today is incredible.
I'm going to connect you with Epictetus. So Marcus Aurelius's Meditations was like a journal. It was like there's this guy, really cool emperor uh, guy, and he learned about Stoicism, and then he practiced it and journaled about it.
Yeah, it's his internal thoughts.
Yeah, and so Epictetus has this book called the Handbook, which is just that. Like that's the guide that Marcus Aurelius used to get to where he was at and write Meditations. I find it to be a more accessible type of Stoicism. I think he's just a better writer too. I mean, it's a journal. You
Yeah, I
can't
don't
fault him.
think Marcus was planning on anybody actually finding this and reading it.
Yeah,
The handbook. I'll have to read that.
yeah. I'll send it. I'll send it over to you.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm always I'm fascinated in just like stoicism for example. I took a philosophy class in college and so I just touched the surface of all of those ideas and of understanding how to process information in that way.
yeah,
And I think you're right that if you could get access to that in high school even it would be so beneficial. Just
yeah.
the idea that ideas are their own thing. You don't have to attach yourself to them.
Hmm.
And just because you don't ascribe a certain idea to be beneficial in that moment in your life doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad idea. You
Yeah.
can take stoicism, take elements from it, and practice those. Doesn't mean you have to adopt stoicism as a whole or
Oh,
these
for sure.
various philosophical standpoints, you know?
They're tools.
And that's how we should view it as
Yeah.
a tool. The
Yeah.
idea is a tool.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. There's a piece there too about being, right? We like to think of ourselves as being done, and so when we're tested as if we're the final product. And letting go of that and seeing ourselves as like a thing in process, a thing to be bettered, you know, uh, being the best, nobody really should want to be the best. They want to be striving to be the best. You want to be in that framework, not in feeling like you've arrived and anything that attacks you is wrong because you've already gotten there.
If there's a takeaway from this podcast, it should be that the idea
Yeah,
that you're not a finished product and life isn't about getting to that finished product. It's just about progressing and becoming a better version of yourself every day. That's where I'm 24 and I watch an insane amount of motivational videos and that idea of the constant progression, almost like the drum through life, has just resonated with me. The idea that you're always trying to improve yourself. And I don't know if most people just attribute that idea of being done and to themselves and so they think I don't need to work on myself anymore. I don't know if that is just a human nature thing where you think who I am in this moment is who I am and that's my whole identity and that's all that I'm going to be. That is one of my fears is just not progressing. The idea of staying stagnant in a belief, staying stagnant in a way of life, in a culture, I guess you could say to some extent, just not progressing in a way that is meaningful for me.
I think that different view, that view of looking at process rather than seeing it as a done thing, I think that gets you there, right? If you're not trying to arrive, if you're just focused on journeying, then you never have to worry about stopping because the thing you're doing is inherently movement.
Yes. I mean, it's cliche, but that's the reality is life is a journey. Don't focus on the destination, focus on the ride there.
Oh,
Because we're all going to end up in the ground. That's
right.
that's the only end point. So if you're focused on the end point, it's going to be
Oh,
a
Elon has a
painful
lot of
ride.
money, so he might get out of that one.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. Starts putting those neural links in people's heads. Maybe
Right.
there isn't going to be an end point.
I watch Futurama. I see how that goes. Yeah.
It's a weird world. It is a weird time to be alive.
But going back to the way we started the podcast, being okay with being wrong, you know, it goes into public service. Like public administration is such where we need to see ourselves in that way, and we can't focus on feeling like we've arrived, like this is the finished product. Like I can't let you in to see what I'm doing because you're going to criticize it, and then it's all broken. No, we have to see it as this ever evolving thing. We have to take the ego out of it. We have to try our hardest to be better, and to do things impeccably. But that's what we're trying to do, the process. And we need to allow others to get in there and make sure that we're on that right track without feeling like we're being attacked personally.
And the ability to innovate, which also seems like that is a core in your campaign. The idea that it's not this finished product. We can improve. We're going to continue to make these steps. I think I read on your campaign page the idea of being preemptive with
Yeah.
all those laws because those do trickle down. And so rather than waiting for the ball to drop, we can kind of get ahead of it a little bit.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's it. We need to be ready for what's happening. We need to do needs assessments. What do people want? Realtors seem fairly unhappy with the customer service on the clerk recorder side. That's the thing I constantly hear about. Customer service, things taking too long to process, things getting bounced back and forth. But figuring out how, so public service is just that, it's serving the public, and the public can have changing needs. We need to constantly be in communication with the public so that we know when those needs shift, so that we can adapt to them. So even if we've got it right for now, that doesn't mean we've got it right for tomorrow.
I think that's a great perspective to have going into office.
No, let's
That's the
hope that's
plan. Yeah.
the
Right.
yeah.
Juan, this was great. We can end it here. We did an hour and a half. Do you want to plug where people can find you, where they can find your campaign?
Yeah. So vote for Juan Pablo. .com is the website. Ballots go out October 10th. Voting happens November 8th. Vote early. It makes my job a lot easier, whether you're wanting to put it in the mail or drop it off in our office. Yeah, voting early gets you posted on those election night results that come out first.
Okay, well, Juan, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to come on and do this. I really appreciated talking with you.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. This is a great forum. Like I said, the more information that people have on candidates, the more informed a decision they're going to make, the more likely they are to get out and vote, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah,
Just exercise your civic right to be able to vote.
yeah, and take
Cast your
ownership.
ballot.
Yeah,
We'll have to get you back on talk philosophy. I'll read that.
anytime.
Yeah, that handbook. I think that'd be great.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks, Juan.
Take care.